Hello everyone, I'm Maddie Hooper and I'm a sophomore at the University of South Carolina. Today I will talk about something serious that's been an ongoing problem in our society for years. First, I want to discuss how our society is viewed today. In today's society, many people are focused on what's going on in the present. We live in a world where people are so caught up with what's happening in front of them, they don't really think about the future. I believe the culture we live in is where everything is about me. And sadly, this is due to advancements in our technology and the rise of social media. Some people might call our society today self-centered or self-obsessed. Unfortunately, nature is proving these criticisms about people today true. We are living in a time where understanding and knowing about the future is so critical to our survival on the earth for the next 30 years or so. Through multiple signs through nature, which I'll discuss later in the video, nature is now showing scientists today that our Earth is slowly losing important natural resources that we can't live without if we want to survive. Today, our world is suffering from a major issue known as climate change. Many people hear about this in the news, and it's actually brought up tension between political parties. What a lot of people don't understand is how serious climate change is. People today are just ignorant to the subject and the severity that climate change can have on not only nature and our planet, but on the human race as a whole. So today in this video, I'll be discussing climate change and environmental degradation, discussing what it is, and how serious of a matter it is for everyone living on Earth. I will also discuss how food production affects climate change and how climate change affects food security in the world today. Finally, I'll finish talking about sustainable agriculture, food agriculture practices, and how they are more helpful than industrial agricultural practices. First, I want to go over what exactly climate change is by differentiating the difference between climate and weather. So weather and climate, they get mixed up daily. The main difference between these two is time. Weather and climate are both conditions in the atmosphere. However, weather lasts over a short period of time, that being like days to weeks. Climate, on the other hand, has long periods of time, with the standard average being 30 years. Now that we know what climate is and how it is different from weather, let's explore the definition of climate change. Climate change is the rising or lowering of the Earth's average annual temperature and the change in global or regional climate patterns. Climate change is caused by increased levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gases, which are produced by burning fossil fuels. The main cause to climate change is the trend of human expansion of the greenhouse effect. Now, what is the greenhouse effect? The greenhouse effect is the trapping of the sun's radiation in the Earth's lower atmosphere due to gases such as carbon dioxide and methane, acting as a blanket and preventing this radiation from escaping from outer space. This warming of the planet is causing ice caps to melt, sea levels to rise, deforestation, and the obvious changes in climate. The greenhouse effect is not only a major factor in climate, but also in environmental degradation. Again, what is environmental degradation? Environmental degradation is the deterioration of the environment through the depletion of resources such as air, water, and soil, the destruction of ecosystems and habitats, the extinction to wildlife, and of course, pollution. The scary thing is, food production and agriculture are one of the main contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, which in turn is a major contributor into environmental degradation. Agriculture is comprised of 10 to 12% of the global man-made greenhouse gases. And these man-made greenhouse gases are produced by burning fossil fuels, which obviously leads to higher levels of carbon dioxide or CO2. And this was found in 2005 according to the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. It was also found that non-CO2 greenhouse gases emissions from agriculture contribute to as much to 56% of the global non-CO2 gases. What components of agriculture cause greenhouse gas? One of the main causes is animal agriculture. First, animal agriculture puts a strain on many of Earth's water and energy resources. We have to accommodate 70 billion animals for human consumption, which takes up a third of the planet's ice-free land and close to 16% of our global freshwater supply. Cattle are the biggest source of emissions of greenhouse gases in animal agriculture due to enteric fermentation. Enteric fermentation is a natural digestive process in cattle. Methane, a common greenhouse gas, is released from enteric fermentation and also partially from animal manure. 44% of man-made methane emissions is from animal agriculture alone, and the primary driver of climate change related to livestock. Although CO2 emissions are a main greenhouse gas, methane is 34 more times potent than carbon dioxide for 100 years. Another major source of greenhouse gas emissions in agriculture and food production is the use of fertilizers in crop production. So why do we use fertilizers in the first place? Fertilizers are used to replace nutrients that crops remove from soil to reproduce crops at a faster rate. So basically, fertilizers just enhance the nutrients in the crops so we can get more yield of the crop. Without fertilizers, our world will have smaller crop yields, and we wouldn't be able to sustainably feed everyone in our world. Although fertilizers help us sustain food security, it has terrible impacts on our atmosphere because it releases nitrous oxide. Now, nitrous oxide is one of the most potent greenhouse gases and has an atmospheric lifetime of 110 years. The issue here is if we get rid of fertilizers, we are significantly reducing crop yield, and this can not only have major impacts on our human food security, but also high energy crops, but also it can have major impacts on energy because high energy crops such as corn are used for biofuel. One more factor from food production that can contribute from greenhouse gas emissions is the burning of fossil fuels for the use of farm equipment. These burning of fossil fuels, as I mentioned before, release carbon dioxide into our atmosphere. Such farm equipment includes tractors and irrigation pumps. Our world is in such high demand for food that we have to keep producing and yielding crops to feed our planet, which means we have to use fertilizers. By 2050, it is projected that consumption for meat and dairy products is expected to rise 76% for meat and 64% for dairy due to the growing world population. This will only have more of a resource burden in the food production industry. Deforestation is also a major trend into how agriculture is affecting environmental degradation. Extensive clearing of trees has been put in place for agricultural land use. The funny thing is, climate change is also having negative effects on food production. Due to the rising average temperature, desertification is happening in climates that shouldn't even be dry. This causes less land space to be used for growing crops or livestock. Climate change is also producing unpredictable weather patterns. These include increases of rain, increases of snow, storms, droughts, flooding, and hurricanes. With all these weather patterns play a crucial role in the weather and whether the yield for livestock and crop will be high that harvest season. With unpredictable weather, farmers will not know what their crops and livestock yield will be for that harvest season, as I just mentioned. The main issue is that climate change is a social and ethical problem in regards to food production. Do we stop growing livestock and crops to reduce these emissions when our planet population is only growing? Do we reduce food production and have more people malnourished to help decrease the emissions of greenhouse gases? Or will that just drive our world into a global chaos? Thankfully, one answer to all these questions that will help control climate change is sustainable food production, the alternative to traditional industrial food production. Industrial food production uses pharmaceutical compounds, inexpensive labor, and their overall goal is to meet the demand of food to the people, disregarding the earth's health. Industrial farming uses pesticides to prevent insects from harming their crops, but these pesticides can be associated with acute poisoning and long-term chronic illness for workers and for local communities around them. Industrial farming also uses chemical fertilizers, which I mentioned before, releases extreme levels of nitrous oxide, which is the most potent greenhouse gas. Industrial farming can also result to erosion, which results to loss farmland value, loss of biodiversity in the ecosystem, and the depletion of soil biodiversity, which is very important to our planet. And that's also due to the chemical fertilizers. It also has social impacts, such as the pollution from fertilizers and pesticides damaging the local water supplies for surrounding communities. Sustainable food production does or tries to do the complete opposite of what industrial food production does. Sustainable food production is a method of producing food using processes and systems that are non-polluting, that conserve renewable energy and natural resources, are efficient to the economy and safe for workers and surrounding communities. In summary of that, sustainable food production does not cause damage to the environment. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of negative impacts to using unsustainable food production or industrial food production practices. However, industrial or unsustainable food production practices are still being used because it helps us meet the food security demand today, unlike sustainable, which takes longer time to yield crops. However, our society needs to think about the long-term effects that each practice has. Sustainable food production will save our planet, or at least give us more time to try to find a solution with the ongoing problem of climate change. With sustainable food production, we know we aren't harming the planet. Whereas industrial, we know we're harming the planet, however, we're feeding people on Earth. The world already has 1 billion people malnourished. Would it be ethically or socially acceptable to stop using industrial food production practices and use sustainable ones if we know this might increase the malnutrition rate around the world? It's a matter of whether or not we want our future generations to be able to live on Earth or not. People who practice sustainable food production are helping the Earth by valuing it and are thinking of future generations of food, or the future of food for future generations. If we continue to use these chemicals and pesticides that industrial farming uses, we're only destroying our planet more, limiting us in the future of what we can grow and where we can grow. In conclusion, it is ultimately up to future generations on how we should treat our Earth. It is their responsibility to understand the scary circumstances that we are about to face in the next couple of decades due to climate change. Future generations of not only farmers, but people should have the responsibility to educate and inform other generations about how serious climate change is not only to our Earth, but to our production of food. After reading several articles and watching the videos about climate change, about how climate change affects our Earth, I am genuinely terrified for what the future holds for our world. I have tried researching this project. I've reached out to many friends with concerns, and many of them were like, it's fine, when the world ends, or there'll be a solution, but we can't keep thinking this way. Our society today is selfish. They don't care or are ignorant of what is going on in the world, or what is going to happen if change doesn't happen, just like my friends. They didn't seem to care. I believe the best way to make change is to educate the uneducated, to make people who don't care about what's going to happen care. The more we have people around the world know about this problem, the faster we can find a solution. Whether that be even better sustainable practices or major technological advancement, climate change affects everything that calls Earth home, and now it's our duty to clean and restore our beautiful planet that we call home.